Okay, so today we are looking at our notes for, they say 11.3 part 1 on the top of them, but we are actually doing this second. So yesterday we did 11.3 part 2, I guess, which was the area of regular polygons. Today this is the area of rhombuses and kites. So a rhombus, as we know from chapter 7, has 4 congruent sides. We see that from the markings on the diagram. There are some properties about rhombuses that we want to remember that will help us in this particular section. The first one is that the diagonals are perpendicular. So remember the diagonals go across the shape like that. And we know that they're perpendicular. And then the diagonals also bisect opposite angles. So they do cut those angles in half. A kite has 2 pairs of consecutive congruent sides. So the sides right next to each other are congruent as opposed to opposite. So these are congruent and then these are congruent. We know that on a kite the diagonals are also perpendicular. So diagonals are perpendicular in both of these shapes. 1 pair of opposite congruent angles, 1 but only 1. And then it has no parallel sides. So in a kite, that 1 pair of opposite congruent angles are the ones that where the 2 different sides meet. So those two angles would be congruent. There's the same area formula for both rhombuses and kites, and it is 1/2, and it involves the diagonals. 1/2 d1 times d2. So you take the product of those 2 diagonals, you multiply them. So the length of one times the other one, and then you just multiply by 1/2 or divide it by 2. So these ones on the first page, we're just finding the area of the rhombus or kite, and they give us most or all of the information that we need. So here, they showed us underneath this shape, which by the way is a rhombus, because it has 4 congruent sides. They showed us that the rhombus, one of the diagonals is 6, which means this is also 6, the diagonal, because they marked it underneath. And then this dimension is 8, which means this diagonal is 8. So they did give us both of the diagonal lengths. So remember our formula for the area is just 1/2 multiplied by the product of the diagonals, and we already know that those are 6 and 8. It doesn't matter which one we call D1 and which one we call D2. So it's 1/2 times 48, so it should be 24 square meters for the area. The next shape that we see is a kite. It has consecutive congruent sides, but it doesn't have 4 congruent sides. The area formula is the same for a kite. So they do give us both of the diagonals. Again, this one would be 10, the horizontal one. This vertical one would be 7. So we're just going to plug into the formula. So the formula is A equals 1/2 D1 times D2. So it's going to be 1/2 times 70, which is 35. Remember, if you're just directly typing that in the calculator, you do need to put parentheses around that fraction. The next one is also a kite, and we also know how long the diagonals are. So we know one of them is 12, and one of them is also 12. So both of the diagonals are 12 in this kite. So when we do our formula, we have, I'm just going to write that it's a kite up here. We have area equals 1/2 D1 times D2. So it'd be 1/2 times 144, which should be 72. This one doesn't have a unit on it, but the area is 72. Okay, this next one's a little bit different. Looks like it's a rhombus. It has 4 congruent sides. But on this particular one, they don't tell us both of the diagonals. They do give us enough information to find both of them, though. So we know that this one is 6. And then on this triangle, if we look at one of these triangles, which we know the diagonals are perpendicular, we know this would be 3 because it'd be half of 6, and then the hypotenuse is 5. If you plug into the Pythagorean theorem to get this length, which I'll call x, it's going to be a 3, 4, 5 triangle. Remember, that's one of those Pythagorean triples that we want to be familiar with. I'm showing the work here, but your x value is going to end up being 4. So that x value is 4. Remember, on a rhombus, if this is 4, hold on one second. Just kind of erasing some of my markings. If this is 4, this will also be 4 because a rhombus has 4 congruent sides. So we know that this is 3. So in both of those triangles, that dimension would be 4. Therefore, this whole diagonal is 8. So when you do your formula for the area, its area equals 1/2 d1 times d2. So it would be 1/2 times 48, which is 24 square units. Okay, we want to keep in mind that sometimes they might have a few more steps. Sometimes those steps are the Pythagorean theorem, or usually it would be the Pythagorean theorem. So on the back, we have some more complicated examples here. So on this first one, we want to find the area. It looks like it's a rhombus. So in a rhombus, the diagonals do bisect each other. Actually doesn't say that on the properties on these notes, but like I showed you on this one, by nature the diagonals do have to bisect each other because it creates these congruent triangles. So therefore, if this part is 3.2, this part of the diagonal is also 3.2 inches. And then similarly, if this is 8.5, this is also 8.5. So on this rhombus, oops, I spelled that wrong, sorry. Changing that. Okay, on this rhombus, you don't need to write what kind of shape it is. I'm just doing that on these notes. On this rhombus, the area would be 1/2 d1, one of the diagonals, like this total diagonal would be 17, times d2. This other total diagonal, this dimension, it's a little bit hard to label on the shape itself. This total diagonal would be 3.2 plus 3.2, which is 6.4. I'm actually going to put that one in my calculator. So I'm putting parentheses around that 1/2. And then it's 17 times 6.4. And I'm getting 54.4 inches squared. The next one looks like it's a kite. So on this kite, we know this whole diagonal is 26. We also know that these diagonals meet at a right angle. The diagonals do not necessarily both bisect each other, but we do know that a kite has one pair of opposite congruent angles. So we know that this angle is congruent to this angle. So therefore, these two like triangles are congruent by side angle angle. So we have a side, an angle, and an angle in both triangles. So because those are congruent triangles, basically whenever you have a kite, you know that one of the diagonals is bisected. So this is also going to be 7.8. That other diagonal, the horizontal one, is not bisected by the other diagonal. And you can kind of tell that by looking at the scale. So here, now we can find the area because we have the lengths of both diagonals. One of the diagonals is 26. The other one would be 7.8 plus 7.8, which would be 15.6. I'm typing that in the calculator because it has those decimals. So I'm putting the 1/2 in parentheses. 26 times 15.6 is 202.8 square centimeters. Couple more here. So this next one is a rhombus. On a rhombus, the diagonals do both bisect each other. So that would also be 8. But we also knew they meet at a right angle. We know that a rhombus has 4 congruent sides. So this is also 10. If you were to use the Pythagorean theorem on this triangle or any of the triangles, because they are all congruent, if you were to use the Pythagorean theorem and call this x, that x is going to end up being 6. 6, 8, 10 is a Pythagorean triple. So because I know we already know how to do the Pythagorean theorem, I'm going to write a 6 there. But if you wanted to show the work, I mean, we probably should show the work if it's on a quiz or a test. So that's 6, which means this diagonal is also 6. Or that part of the diagonal is also 6. So therefore the diagonals are, this one would be 16, the one that I just colored all in red, and the one that I'm coloring in blue would be 12. So it'd be, I'm just writing a rhombus, although that's probably not necessary. But the area is 1/2. And we said it'd be 16 times 12. Getting 96 square kilometers. The next one is also a rhombus, really kind of the same idea. So if that's 14, this is 7, this is 7. They do, why do I keep spelling that wrong? So in a rhombus, the diagonals do bisect each other, meaning they're both cut in half. So that would definitely be 7 for each. Let's do the Pythagorean theorem to find this. So do 7 squared plus x squared equals 15 squared. And we're just solving that. Looks like the x value here is not as nice as the last one. It's not a Pythagorean triple. It's about 13.3. So remember our x was right here. I'm highlighting it in blue. We're going to go back and we're going to realize that that is 13.3 now. So this is 13.3 and so is this. So that total diagonal is, this whole way, is 26.6. So our area is going to be 1/2 26.6 times 14. So that is going to be 186.2 millimeters squared, square millimeters. Just a couple more here. Looks like we have one kite here. On this particular kite, we have enough information to find, well, we know this is 30. This total diagonal is 30, which means this part might be 21. We may or may not need that. We actually don't need that, but it would be 21. But we can use like just this triangle right here and the Pythagorean theorem to find this. We'll call it x. So underneath this picture, I'm going to do 9 squared plus x squared equals 15.5 squared. Solve that. I'm getting x squared equals 159.25. I'm going to square root that. X is about 12.6 to the nearest tenth. So when we look at this picture, I just found out that that x value that I had is 12.6. So this is 12.6. So, sorry, my iPad just did something weird. So this is 12.6. This is the diagonal that would be bisected. We can kind of tell the other one wouldn't be, but it's really because these are congruent triangles, like I explained earlier. So this is 12.6. So the area, we now have both of the diagonals. So it's going to be 1/2. This whole diagonal is 30. This whole diagonal is 12.6 plus 12.6, which is 25.2. So plug that into the calculator. I'm getting 378 square meters. I just have one more here. Well, before that bottom one. So this says find the area. It's another kite. I forgot to write what this was, and that's going to bother me. So this was a kite, again. And this is a kite because it has two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. So here, we know that this diagonal would be bisected. So if that's 30, this is also 30 because of that congruent triangle reason. We just need to find the other diagonal. It looks like we're going to have to use the Pythagorean theorem twice. So I'll call this x, and I'll call this y. So do x squared plus 30 squared equals 29.4 squared. And we're going to solve that for x in this triangle. So we have x squared plus 900. Oops, something is wrong about this. Okay, sorry. Looking at this picture, that doesn't make any sense, does it? Because the hypotenuse has to be the longest side. So I think something got messed up with this picture. And that 30 was supposed to be the whole thing. So let me try to go back and fix this. Okay, it's definitely still a kite. But if that 30 is the whole thing, this just got like chopped off. So this whole thing is 30. That means this is 15 and that's 15. Now that makes more sense. So do the Pythagorean theorem over here with the triangle that I'm making red. I'm getting 25.3 approximately for x. Do the same thing to get y. I'm going to color this triangle blue. So do y squared plus 15 squared equals 60.4 squared. So you have y squared plus 225 equals I'm getting about 58.5 for y. So that means for this whole diagonal that I'm highlighting in yellow, that whole diagonal would be 25.3 plus 58.5. So this whole diagonal, if we add these two numbers together, it's 83.8. So that one's 83.8. The other one is 30. So the area, to go back and find that, it's 1/2 d1 times d2. One of them was 83.8 for the horizontal diagonal. The other one was 30. So I'm going to put that in the calculator. And I get 1257. And that is it on that one. Okay, so I just kind of made an executive decision here. I think that's probably enough for that. I know it gets kind of long watching videos. So I think for now we're going to skip this one. I don't think there's anything like it on your homework, but if there is, you can skip it. And if there's anything like that on the quiz, we'll talk about it on Monday. So for now, what I want you to do, and I will upload a notes key later, and I will put the video on Google Classroom as well. But for now, what I want you to do is work on your homework. So the sub at this point will pass out the homework. It's a worksheet. If there's a ton of extra time at the end, the sub does also have the quiz review available. It's really not necessary to do it today, though, and I want you to do this first. So just if you have a bunch of extra time, you could start working on that. Don't feel like you need to do it all because that's all that we're doing on Monday. So the homework is just the worksheet that goes along with this. So this is 11.3. It says part 1. I think your worksheet does too. So they will pass it out right now. And then just the reminder, you have a quiz on Tuesday. So the plan for Monday is to review for that quiz. All right, thank you. And I will see you on Monday.